Hello and welcome to Noel's Retro Lab. Today we have an unusual computer. And no, this is not an Amstrad CPC 464, it's a 472. That's a pretty unusual model that was sold in Spain during a few months, and it has a very colorful history. So join me today as we learn more about this fascinating computer. We open it up and see what exactly it has inside, and then we try to restore it and leave it as good as new. So here it is, the CPC 472 with a whopping 72K of RAM. The computer itself looks to be in very good shape. It's dirty, you can tell. So we'll definitely have to pop the keys out. The case is just a little dull, but there's nothing really broken in the case, so that's great. This area over here, the scratch, there's nothing we're able to do with that or that one. Interestingly, this is kind of faded and orangey. This is supposed to be red. But in every 472 that I've seen, this tends to happen. They turn yellow. So I don't know if they were yellow initially and they weren't printed correctly, or they just used a different process. And with time, they turn this orange color. Whereas the 464s, mostly, not all of them, but mostly they tend to stay red in there. So yeah, that's interesting. And it even has the reset button for the tape counter, which is kind of, half of them don't have it. It's the first thing to break when something bumps into it. So it's good that it has it. The pause key also works. That's another thing that often breaks. So yeah, it looks pretty good. I think we'll be able to do a great restoration with it. So the most obvious thing when looking at a 472 is how similar it really is to the 464. As a matter of fact, they are just about identical. We have the numbers are different, the logos are the same, and this is 72K and then 64K. Everything else is the same. You would think the colors of those keys are different. No, these are faded colors. You can see the blue in there. So the keys were the same originally. Unfortunately, those got faded with time and light. And this is what I was telling you earlier. This is the color of the red in the tape area. And then somehow this turned orange. But other than that, they are pretty much the same. So another difference between the 472 and the 464 is that the 472, since it was manufactured for the Spanish market, is kind of half localized. They did a very rushed job of localizing it. So yeah, they put this text in Spanish instead of in English. But notice that the keyboard is still on in English. We have Shift, Tab. We don't have the ñ key that you see in Spanish versions of the 464. They also changed this text over here instead of that one. But other than just the text on the case, everything else is the same. So what's the difference, and why did Amstrad make the 472? To understand the Amstrad CPC 472, we need to go back to 1984, when Dragon Computers was sold to a Spanish company called Eurohard. A year later, in 1985, the main computers in Spain were the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, the Amstrad CPC 464, which was just released the year before, along with some Commodore 64 and some MSX systems. All of these computers were being imported from other countries, and remember, Spain wouldn't join the European Union until January of 1986. Eurohard, in a move to make room for their Dragon computers on the marketplace, managed to convince the Spanish government to pass a law taxing all import of computers in July 1985. The backlash from computer manufacturers didn't take long, and within a month they were forced to change that law and only apply the import tax to computers with 64K of RAM or less, which happened to be most of the personal computers at the time. So what did Amstrad do? To their credit, they reacted really quickly, and in just 2 weeks, they quote-unquote designed the 472 by adding 8 more K of RAM and just making those minor changes to the case. Let's open it up and see what exactly is inside. And here it is. The board itself looks pretty good. It's not very dirty. Some corrosion there, but that's normal, easy to fix. And this is the main difference. We have a new ROM right there, and that's an extra 8K of RAM. That's a 4164 DRAM, and the other 8 4164s are here. So 8 times 8, 64K of RAM plus 8 more, that's 72K of RAM in theory. And how exactly does it compare to the board of the 464? Well, again, they're very, very similar. This particular one is fitted with the 410 gate array, whereas this one is the 407 gate array. But notice that the board actually, you can put either one of them, has room for both of them. They just have different ones fitted there. But yeah, other than that, they're exactly the same everywhere except for this add-on. So it's hard to see what exactly is here because apart from the new ROM and the 8K of RAM, we also have a couple integrated circuits in there. So it's just hard to see. And this is all put together with 2 ribbon cables that are fitted right here in the soldering spots for the ROM. Let's desolder one of them. That way we can open up the ribbon and get a much better look at what's happening here. So let's look at it now that we have the ribbon removed. So we have the 8K of RAM, we have the new ROM, and we have a couple integrated circuits. There are 74 LS, this is 08 and 38. I don't know the numbers by heart, but they're probably like an AND gate and some other kind of discrete logic. It's plausible to put this here, right? Because arriving to the ROM, we have the full data bus, we have the full address bus, and then in order to use the 16K, you would need some kind of logic deciding when we're going to access this. Did I say 16K again? When are we going to access this 8K versus some of the other RAM in the system? So how exactly are they wired together? So let's find out. So first of all, the ROM should just be connected one-to-one to the ribbon. So each of those pairs are connected. Yeah. Right. So what about the rest? So for example, specifically, the 4164 pin 2 is data in. So this one is data in. So in order for it to work, it needs to be connected somewhere in the address bus. And it's not. What about data out? Oh no, wait, I grabbed the wrong one because this is the notch in here. So pin 2 is this. Right, it says it there. So this is pin 2. And there's even a track coming out of pin 2. But it's not connected anywhere. In pin 14, this one is the one where the data comes out. And it's not connected. And just randomly, let's grab a CAS, which is pin 15. And it's definitely not connected. Just for fun, are these tracks real? So they're not even real. So I'm connecting this one. It looks like there's a track, right? That comes like this to this one. I mean, yeah, I do have continuity. These tracks are not even real. There's no connection between any of those pins and even the discrete logic. So what's going on in here? We have this memory, but it's not connected to anything. Indeed, it turns out the 8K of RAM weren't connected to anything. It was just a ruse to get around the tax law. That's actually probably why they designed the add-on with those stiff ribbon cables hiding half of the board, to discourage any engineers from looking at it closely. They even tried justifying the 8K of RAM in the manual, which by the way was so rushed, that still had the 464 model on the cover but not on the spine. There they explained the 8K of RAM was needed for the new ROM, which if you turn it on you see the basic 1.1, that the 664 model had, except that the 664 model had only 64K of RAM. In later versions of the 472, they actually gave up all pretenses, went back to the old ROM, and removed that note from the manual completely. In any case, just a few months later, in January of 1986, Spain joined the European Union, and all those laws would become a moot point. So Amstrad promptly dropped the 472 model and went back to selling the 464 for the Spanish market, although this time they fully localized it. Now that we've decided that this is all a lie, let's put it back together. I mean, technically, we could take the ROM and just socket it and put it there, and it would work exactly the same because everything else is just for show. But we might as well put it back the way it was. It's kind of the charm of this sort of unique computer moment of its time. So let's just solder it back together, and then let's see if it works. All right, it's soldered back together. So let's give the board a test. Let's connect the video and power cable. This is just a quick connector that I use to avoid plugging in the whole case when testing the computer, and it just makes sure that the switch is on. Yep, there you go, it works great. And there you see the basic 1.1 that supposedly those 8K buys us. All right, so now that we know it works, it's time to give it a good scrub and leave it as good as new. To clean the case well, we need to remove the keyboard and the tape deck. There's one screw that always gets stuck to the speaker because it's magnetic, so you always have to remove it afterwards. And the little LED as well. Let's also pop out the plastic door of the tape deck. We'll clean it later. And we do the usual thing. Lots of water and lots of soap and lots of water again. I'll leave it out in the sun to dry out while we do something else. We pop out all the keys, separating the springs. In this case, all the springs are the same, so we don't need to worry about the space key or the enter key having different springs like in some computers. We need to remove the back of the keyboard and the membrane. Oh wow, that's filthy. So we can get to those metal latches behind the large keys like space and shift. Here we just remove the dust from the membrane, and then we just apply some window cleaner and leave it nice and clean. And finally, we go one by one, scrubbing every key with that window cleaner and a rag. Here are the keys, and it looks like they've cleaned up really nicely. However, one thing I noticed, so these green ones have a slight yellowish tinge to them, and that happens when they get just probably sun exposure. But the ones that are really bad are these. This is the color they're supposed to be, and that's how they are now. You can even tell like it was getting sun in this direction. And look, over here, it's perfect. But this is just, it's a shame. It's such a beautiful, bright color. And same thing with this other one. It's just totally gray. Now, some people say you can restore some of the color, kind of like the retro brighting that you do with yellowed keys. In my experience, I haven't been able to do that yet. Every single time that I've tried, what I managed to get is just lighten up the existing colors, so that blue gets a lot lighter, and you really don't get much of a blue here. Since these keys are just standard 464 keys, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in the dungeon of the Retro Lab and dig out any old spare 464 keyboards that I have around there and see if I find better blue pieces. It took some digging, but I was able to find this keyboard. I have multiple keyboards. The problem is that Some of them are in Spanish, some of them are in English, some of them are this type of keyboard, and some of them are the early tall keys keyboard, and some of the other ones I have are the correct combination, but they have also really faded blue keys. So this particular one actually came out of a 464, and it has really nice blue keys. So what I'm going to do is I'd rather have those really nice colors on the 472 since it's the rare model. So I'll just swap them around with those. The case is looking pretty good, but the logo is kind of bothering me. You know, it has a texture and it looks like there's dirt stuck in there. So I'm going to try cleaning it up with a toothbrush, see if that helps. Yeah, that was perfect. So the case is pretty clean, including the Amstrad logo, but it's a little worn, it's a little dull, both of the touch and by the looks of it. So if you've seen some of my other restoration videos before, you should know by now that I like to put in a little bit of car dashboard protectant. And I find that this helps it really make the plastics look brand new. And I believe it also protects them in the long run against more UV exposure and just more general wear. So I always like to apply some of this to some of the computers that I restore. I was going to do the same thing on the underside of the case, but I noticed there was a sticker here, which I normally like to restore the stickers, but this is clearly gone, so we might as well remove some of that gunk before we apply the protectant. So I'll just use some alcohol and a Q-tip. There we go. After a few minutes, when the product has had a chance to sort of soak into the case, we just wipe the excess away with a paper towel. And then we can buff the plastic with a dry, clean rag. At this point, we can start assembling the main board. I haven't tested the tape deck yet, but that's one of the things that fails over time very easily. After 30 years, it almost never works. So I'm going to take it out, give it a full tune-up, and then we'll test it. The tape deck looks a little dusty, so let's just give it a quick brush and remove the big clumps of dust. The counter belt, it's not in place, and it looks tight enough. Yeah, it moves the counter. Okay, that one's good. This belt, you pretty much always have to replace it. Yeah, I just moved it and it skidded and it didn't move the big wheel. So let's just replace it before trying it. It's much more reliable to put a new one. Okay, that seems nice and tight. While we're here, we can look at the capacitors. Sometimes you need to replace those. If so, it will be pretty obvious. We'll get noise when we try to load from tape, but visually they look okay. The volume control wheel often gets all dirty and makes bad contact. And that results in the Amstrad making crackling noises or even sometimes just not hearing very much. So before I even do anything, I just applied some contact cleaner directly there and just move it back and forth a few times. And I do this, as a matter of fact, for every single time I pull out one of these Amstrads, because this happens a lot. There you go. That should be good enough. I find the best way to test this is to actually not put the top case back in. So instead, just put the cassette tape here and the keyboard over there. And that way it's really easy to access the front and the back, and we can take it back to the repair table and do some fixes. So if you put it back together, it's just a pain because you need to unscrew it every single time. So let's test it out. And so we need to turn it on this way, like that. So I need to flip the keyboard and press the magic combination. And so far, so good. There we go. Usually when that kind of turbo load starts, if the tape deck is not adjusted correctly, it will stop loading. So it sounds like we need to adjust it a little bit. So when programs don't load, it could be for a variety of reasons. First of all, it could be the head that is just worn. We've already cleaned it up, but it could be worn or damaged. But I don't know how much you can see it in the camera, but it actually looks fine. So I don't see anything wrong with the head. It can certainly be the rubber belt, but we've exchanged that. It's a little hard. That could be it. So it's important to check that all the gears move fine. So they should be really loose, all of them, except for this one, because this one is connected to the rubber pulley. But yeah, all those are fine. But this one feels a little tight. And the rubber band is not too tight, but yeah. Let me remove it. Yeah, these two feel really good. Maybe that's a little tight. I'm gonna put just a tiny drop of oil there. There we go. There we go. Yeah, it actually feels a little better. So yeah, some extra resistance in one of these axles will definitely make the tape move at a different speed that it's supposed to, or just have a slight catch and it varies in speed, and that's enough for things not to load correctly. The other thing we can do is press, for example, play. When we rotate the wheel, it moves fine. Yep. So let's go ahead and test that. So I'm trying to load this and check out what's happening. The tape, it's moving a little bit and then it's stopping. It's just not getting enough traction to move this. And the interesting thing is that while that's happening, the pull in the back is moving just fine. So there's something that is preventing it from moving correctly. All right, so if this wheel is spinning, then the rubber pulley is fine. This is not slipping. The slippage happens here. So this one is not moving. This one is not driving the tape. So if we press play, the wheels go in place. And if I move the drive, you should be able to see this moving. This one over there, right? Because the one I'm moving with my finger moves this one, which moves this, and this is a friction joint, and it moves this wheel, which moves the tape. If I put a little pressure there, this doesn't move because this is slipping here. So this must be a little worn, or it's just not applying enough pressure here. So notice that when I press play, this wheel moves up. So this metal piece is pushing the wheel down. And as soon as I press play, it releases it and it moves up by itself because it has a spring back here. So one thing we can try doing is lubricating this a little bit and make sure that when the metal piece is not holding it down, that it moves up as far as it can go. Now just press play a few times just to get it well lubricated. And then I can get some of the excess oil with a cotton tip. So the other reason this may be happening is what I mentioned earlier. There's this rubber ring around this wheel, and that often breaks and cracks, and then it causes very similar problems. This one looks fine though, and they're not the easiest thing to replace, so if it's working fine, I don't want to replace it. So let's try this again like this. All right, that's farther than we've gotten so far. Awesome, that's really encouraging. Excellent. There's one last small detail. The plastic door of the tape deck. These tend to get really scruffed up and scratched. And just dirty. So just cleaning them usually helps a lot. This one, unfortunately, has a crack that just runs through. So it doesn't matter how much we polish it, this is not going to go away. So in cases like this, especially when I'm trying to leave a computer really, really nice, I just use a new plastic door. I don't have any new ones around, so what I have is another one that it's in pretty good shape. It's not perfect. So let's take this and let's actually give it a little bit of car polish, and that leaves it much better, and it's gonna look way better than the other one. So this is what I use, a car scratch remover. And just put some in there and smear it. And you keep doing that. They say to do this multiple times, and unless you have really bad scratches, I find that once is fine. Okay, that's good enough for now. And then the back. And then just wipe it down really well. It's much better now. Now just put it back in. The thick pieces are at the bottom. The tabs goes right there, and then you can just press in, and much better than the old one. And there's the final result. It looks much better than it did at the beginning. No doubt about it. Shame on those scratches, but yeah. It looks great. So there you have it. We have an Amstrad CPC 472 in much better condition than it was. It's not quite new, but it's pretty good. So I hope you enjoy not just the unusual history of the 472, but also the restoration techniques, which you can apply to your own 464, which is a much more common model. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Until next video, see you then.